there has been, there will probably always be a system in place that wants to make you think that you have to suffer. You were programmed to think that you have to suffer so that you can be a docile human, a non-critical thinker, because they need cogs in the system to run whatever it is that they run at the top. So you're programming from your television, you're programming from your religions, you're programming to be in fear, to be a obedient servant, an obedient consumer is a thing. But we don't really have to suffer. We do it as a choice. We do it by choice. I believe that we all go through suffering at some point. We all feel that pain, whether it's a breakup or a losing a job, losing a family member, whatever it is, failing at something, losing a business. There's so many things that you could call suffering in this world. So many that there's hundreds of quotes about suffering. And bear with me, I wrote down a few just to prove to you that you are programmed to think that you have to suffer. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in that suffering. Seneca. The only antidote to mental suffering is physical pain. Walter Benjamin. We can ignore pleasure, but pain insists on being attended to. C.S. Lewis. I mean, I could go on and on about quotes about suffering. One big household saying that everybody came up saying was, no pain, no gain. So you have to understand that since you were a child, when you didn't have any of the power, and unfortunately, your ancestral trauma that went through your parents and trickled down to you made you think that you have to suffer. I agree, and I think that suffering is a necessary part of life, because you can use that suffering and that pain to propel you forward or to push you forward. But it doesn't always have to be that way. You can sort of like get ahead of the curve by doing hard things ahead of time instead of letting the hard times hit you. For instance, you could do cold immersion, which is like cold showers, ice baths. You can do strenuous workouts. A lot of people don't realize, but walking, like a walking meditation where you're just focused on your breathing and you're walking, and that's a huge underutilized tool to getting some exercise, and not only that, helping with your mental health. You have to reframe the way you look at things. Like failures, for instance. Some people will never even get started in the thing that they want to do because they're afraid of failure, but not realizing that you have to fail at stuff to get better at it. The ones who fail the most know the most and have grown the most. Another reason you're suffering is because you're not aligned with your true potential or true meaning in life. Like you have no goals. You have nothing occupying your time or your mind. You're just basically existing. After my divorce, I was on a very terrible low point in my life. So I started listening to like self-help gurus podcasts, started reading a lot, and in one of the podcasts that I listened to, the podcaster was talking about mental health and how if you stay in those low places for too long, you can stay there indefinitely. So I thought to myself, I have to get out of this place. So I took a long break from dating, probably a couple years before I started dating again, and just worked on myself. I constantly read. I got into meditation. I would meditate for hours during the day, an hour probably before work, and on my lunch I would meditate. I would do affirmations where like I wrote down things, kind of like incantations where you're saying them out loud, and just reprogramming your mind from thinking that you're a failure into thinking that you're living an abundant and a grateful life. This is, I had to lift myself up out of that low point in my life, and it helped me realize that with a little bit of gratitude and a little bit of systems and a little bit of discipline, that I would be able to overcome that suffering, that pain. It was funny because my neighbors they'd always be like, "Oh, Anthony must have broke up with this girl again," because I always had like a loud stereo or something, like a surround sound or whatever, when they started coming out with surround sound. And I would just play the oldies like at crazy levels and just sit there on my couch, and I would just be in pain, in mental pain and suffering, and thinking about all the things that I could have done different, or what's the future hold, and having anxiety about the future, because really anxiety is thinking too much about the future, and suffering and pain is thinking about all the stuff that you could have done. But you can't go back in time and fix those things. You have to start somewhere and start putting systems and routine and discipline in your life. And it's never going to be 100% like, oh, like I'm ascended, I'm this amazing being, but you can alleviate the suffering, or at least make it less intense as well. I still am a work in progress. There's still things that I'm working on, but these last couple weeks I feel a different sort of energy where like I'm on a different timeline, where I no longer need those old, hurt, traumatized parts of me from childhood. I hold the power. When you're a child, you have no power. Your parents basically tell you what to do and kind of try to guide you, but that doesn't always pan out for everybody. Back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, both parents knew that they had to work. If you're like a middle income or lower income American, both your parents worked, so they probably didn't have that much time for you. And then, alcoholism in Chicano families ran rampant in those times, and still to this day, and all that generational trauma gets passed down through your genes from one generation to the next. So basically you deal with a lot. And it's true, you can't blame your parents for the rest of your life. You have to take ownership of your life at a certain point. It took me till I was like in my 30s, and I'm still working on myself, and I'll be 50 this year, next month. So you need to put systems in place. You need to be disciplined. You need to let go of those old parts that don't serve you anymore. And some of that suffering can be alleviated. You see, the problem with suffering is it puts you on this loop of not feeling worthy, feeling like a failure, and just self-sabotaging. Eating shit that we're not supposed to eat that is messing with our mental health. There's so many things that are against us. Our food is full of chemicals that spike your blood sugar and all your other hormones and testosterone. Look at your blood sugar as a meter, and they go off the charts by putting cortisol in your system, dopamine at first, and then after the dopamine weans away or falls off, then you get cortisol or whatever other hormone hits you to make you feel tired and groggy and grumpy. And then we think, oh, well, I'll just self-soothe by doing this thing that doesn't serve me anymore, or that I know hurts me, or eat some garbage, or indulge in things I'm not supposed to indulge in. Drugs, alcohol, pornography. I'll just do that thing, and because I'm stressed, and I'll feel better. And then we self-sabotage, and then we feel guilty, and we do it again and self-sabotage. So it's just an ugly cycle that we get into. And that's what suffering really does. I know it's not my usual content that I always make about lowriders and doing the car stuff, but I'm being called because for some reason I feel different. There's things right now that I'm doing that I've never done, that I've never been able to accomplish. And I'll talk more about that stuff in future videos, but I figured that I wanted to get on here. And one of the things I heard was, when you go on YouTube, if you want people to like resonate with you, and I'm just reiterating what I heard, I want to be transparent, so just talk to the camera like you're talking to a younger version of yourself. Give that type of advice. And I wish somebody was around to tell me when I was younger that suffering's a choice. It doesn't have to be as bad or as frequent as it is. You hold the power. You're not powerless anymore. You're not being run and controlled anymore. Well, with that being said, I'll catch you on the next video.